Good evening. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. I am Stesha Brandon. I'm the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin tonight, I want to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral lands of many Indigenous people, particularly those of the Coast Salish region. This includes the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot peoples, among others, who have lived in relationship with the land and waters of the Puget Sound since time immemorial. I'll also mention that the library is a great place if you're looking for resources to learn more about colonization and its impact on Native people and their lands. Welcome to tonight's program, presented in partnership with the Elliott Bay Book Company. I wanted to thank the Seattle Times for their generous support of library programs, and thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation, whose support helps the library provide free programs and services for everybody here in our community. There's going to be a Q&A after the event. Now I am delighted to introduce tonight's speaker. Amara Lakhous is an Italian author, journalist, and anthropologist of Algerian origin. His novel, Clash of Civilizations Over an Elevator in Piazza Vittorio, best name ever, received Italy's Flaiano Prize. You're going to have to say that properly for me. How do you say it? Flaiano. Flaiano? Better? Okay. And it was adapted for film. He's currently a professor in the practice of the Department of Italian Studies at Yale University, and he is going to talk tonight about his new book, Fertility of Evil, which is a heady psychological thriller that spans the history of post-colonial Algeria. So I'm going to let Amara tell you more, but let's give him a warm round of applause.
It's not beer, it's water. Okay, so let me be close to the. So first of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be at Seattle Public Library. Before talking about the fertility of evil, I would like to talk about myself a little bit, just an introduction. So I was born in Algeria, North Africa, south of the Mediterranean, and I grew up in a poor family. Poor family, that means no books. I read my first book at age 14, no books at all, and not television. And at a time in the 70s, having television is very important. The social life was around television, and I was out. So we had in our house, we had our first television when I was 13. I have to say, at that time was a disaster because my friends were talking about the cartoons and the movies, and but later I found that was fantastic because I created my films, I created my cartoons, I created my stories, but imagination. So my imagination expanded. And at age 15, I was in high school. Was the first year in high school. Something fantastic happened. We had a great French teacher of French. She was Algerian, and she was teaching French, and she introduced us to literature for the first time, French literature. So this is how we read Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. So at age 15, I read Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, and this book changed my life. It's really changed my life. And the reason because, and I found this in storytelling, the power of storytelling is you expand your personal life. So when you are telling a story, you put yourself in the shoes of old people, young people, women, men, different backgrounds, Italians, American, and this is a fantastic practice So moving from your identity to embrace the identity of others. So what happened with Madame Bovary, I embraced women identity. So I was educated in very traditional way, men and women, there is a border there. So through this novel, I found myself, as Flaubert said then, Madame Bovary c'est moi. Madame Bovary is me. And he was right. And this is the power of fiction. This is why I'm a novelist. This is why I love fiction. Because when you read or when you write a short story, a novel, a piece of fiction, something amazing happens. You connect with characters. You connect with human life. And through fiction, you cross all kinds of borders. Time, when you read historical novel, space, or you are living in the States and you can read story about Colombia, about Algeria, Morocco, etc. This is space. You can cross gender. So in some novels, there is a first personal narrator, and it's female, and when you are reading, you are a woman, or if kid of man. This is amazing. And crossing religion, cultures, languages. So you, of course, through translation. And this is amazing. This is amazing because we cross our personal identity and we inhabit the lives of others, and the other becomes a mirror. So we can know more about ourselves by watching others. And 3 years ago, I gave a TED talk. You know TED talks. 3 years ago, I gave TED talks in New York with this title: 4 Ways to Expand Your Identity. And one of these, 4 ways. One, just if you have chance to watch it. So the first way is to rethink our identity through diversity, because there is no identity without diversity. So I can say I'm a man because there are women. If there are only men in the world, it will be nonsense to say a man. Muslim, the same, because there are Christians and Jews, and so on. I'm a writer because there are technicians, there are politicians, there are policemen, etc., etc. So thanks to others, I can define my identity. This is why I love fiction. This is why I write novels, and a lot of not just Madame Bovary changed my life. There are other books, other novels, there are other stories, other characters helped me a lot, to understand myself and to face a lot of challenges in my life. And the powerful question, it's very simple, but it's very powerful. It's one, after reading a novel or short story, you ask this question: what if I were that character? And through imagination and through empathy, and this is the key word, empathy, because through empathy we go beyond ourselves. And today we need empathy. We need it a lot. And we can ask, as I asked myself when I read Madame Bovary, what if I were Madame Bovary? What if I were living the lives of Zorba the Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis? It's a masterpiece, one of the books that changed my life too. Santiago, The Old Man and the Sea. Grigor Samsa, The Metamorphose by Kafka. So this is why I love fiction, and this is why I write fiction too. So let me say something about this book. The Fertility of Evil is the story of four people, four Algerians. In 1958, Algeria was at that time under French colonization, and 1958 was the last years of Algerian revolution. So Algerians, we call the war revolution because it was really a revolution, and we liberated Algeria. Algerians liberated Algeria from the French colonialism. And the French colonialism, just to give you an image, it's very similar what it's happening to Palestinians today. Algerians experience the same situation that Palestinians are experiencing today. There are four young Algerians fighters. They were 18 years. So I followed them over 60 years. So not in chronological way, but I choose the turning point of Algerian history. 62 Algerian independence, 65 coup, military coup, and I followed them. So I wrote this novel. I started working on this novel when I moved to New York in 2014. So I lived in Italy for 18 years. So I escaped Algeria in 1955 because I was working as a journalist, and Algeria was unfortunately living in civil war or terrorism. So I lived in Italy for 18 years. I learned Italian, and I started writing in Italian. But in 2000, so my exile in Italy lasted 9 years. In 2004, I went back to Algeria after 9 years. But I was just a visitor. So in 2014, my wife and my wife is American. She's professor in anthropology in University of Pittsburgh. So we met in Rome, and actually she lived and she went to university here in Seattle, University of Washington. And actually we met in Rome because she was doing, she was working and she was doing a master's in Rome center in Rome. This is the University of Washington. So this is why this is, yeah. So so in 2014 we moved to New York, and I discovered something, that living in Italy for 18 years, I was protected by Italy and by Italian culture, by language. And when I moved to New York, I lost this protection. I found myself facing the shadows of the past. And I said to myself, now I think it's time to face the shadows. And this novel is facing shadows. The idea of shadow is the key idea in Carl Jung psychology, is that the shadows are part of our lives. The past, memory, and we can't erase them. We can't cancel the memory. We can't cancel the past like shadows. Nobody can eliminate his shadow. And if you run, the shadow will run. There is no way. So the only way that we have is to find a way to live together, live with them. And this is about my story about Algeria. I wanted to go back to reconcile with this past, with these shadows. And I worked for, I think for 7 years, doing a lot of research. And we did something with my wife. I think it's very original, because we went to Algeria. She did her dissertation, PhD. She was doing a PhD about post-colonial Algeria. So what we did, we went to Algeria almost for 2 years, and we collected material. We worked on the, we used the material in different way. So she wrote her dissertation, and her book is will be published next year with University Chicago Press. And she published many papers too about the, and I used the same material to write a novel, and this is the first, and I just finished the second because it's a trilogy, the project. So I just finished the second. I think this is a great idea how you work, and this is very important for me in all my novels, not just this one. In my all my novels were born from field work. And maybe the best example is my dissertation. I did my PhD in Italy, in Rome University, about Muslim immigrants in Italy. Instead of publishing my dissertation, I published a novel called Divorce Islamic Style. It's published in English. This is my idea of writing fiction. It's not, you have to work on field work, on material. And the second I say the second idea that I found very original and interesting. I wrote this novel in Arabic. I'm bilingual writer in Italian and Arabic. I wrote 2 novels only in Italian. But since the story takes place in Algeria and the characters are Algerians, it made sense to write it in Arabic. And so 3 years ago at Yale, I created a project called Translingual Collective Translation. So I worked with my 3 translators, French, Italian, and English, to translate this book. So we worked together. So they gave me the opportunity to work on a new version of my text in Arabic, and I was the mediator between them. It was an exchange between the translators, and the experience was just great. We learned a lot, and we found that languages are like mirrors. Each language can improve the other, and many solutions came from one language. Because in translation you deal with options. You can translate the same book in many ways. You can translate the same sentence in many ways. You have to choose the best one. And sometimes in negotiation between translations, we found the great solution to face a problem, to resolve a problem. I think this is just an introduction. I would be happy to respond to your questions. Oh yeah, yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm reading from the first chapter. It's a passage from the first chapter. When they got to Saint-Hubert, Soltani had no trouble parking the car in front of magnificent colonial-era villa. There was no trace of the security forces, so he knew the crime was still being kept under wraps. He walked behind General Belkacemi, who rushed ahead, and they entered through the main gate. A large square garden filled with orange and lemon trees appeared before them. He cast a glance at the carefully and tastefully arranged flower beds, then bent over a red rose and caressed it. Leaning in close to sniff its scent, he caught up with the general as he went up to the first floor, seeing an open door at the end of the hallway. He headed toward it and found himself in a spacious bedroom with a large balcony. Despite the open windows, the smell was awful. The first face he saw was that of the medical examiner, Abdu Hamlawi, with traces of sleep still in his eyes. He had likely been told to hurry over and had no time to wash his face. A few steps into the room, the colonel found himself face to face with the body. The victim was naked, hands and feet bound, lying in a mixture of blood, urine, and feces. He drew closer and saw the tip of the man's nose had been placed on his chest, and that his throat had been slit from ear to ear. Then he noticed a man in his 50s by the window. He was fat, short, black-haired, and partially gray, stealing glances at the body, nervously touching his rounded beard and crying silently. Sultani wondered who he was and what he was doing there. He didn't have to wonder for long. The general came over and whispered in his ear, Badruddin Bozar, or Badro for short, the dead man's son-in-law. He was the one who reported the crime. After a little while, a team of 3 men dressed in white, resembling surgeons, approached and began examining the crime scene. They lifted fingerprints and took photographs of everything that could be photographed. As soon as one of them found a dagger covered in blood underneath the pillow, he handed it to the boss, who then inspected it with Sultani after they had put on medical gloves. They concluded that the dagger was most likely the murder weapon. Badro approached and stared at it, surprised and disturbed. Suddenly, he fainted, prompting the general to order someone to assist him immediately. Sultani felt dizzy and rushed out of the room, almost throwing up. He realized he hadn't had his morning coffee yet, and his head was starting to pound. Belkacemi joined him and told him that the case was now his, that he was granting him full authority. Sultani stifled a laugh on hearing the word authority, because he knew that everybody was responsible for protecting his own ass, no matter what authority was given. The general insisted that no effort should be spared to achieve tangible results as quickly as possible. As he left, the boss handed him a piece of paper. This is the address of Hopo House. And what is this amazing place, sir? This is the love nest. You need to go and speak with his wife, Zahra Misbah. My God, guide his creatures. Sultani repeated this phrase whenever he found it difficult to find a reasonable explanation for something. He stuffed the piece of paper into his pocket and thought about the current housing crisis in Algeria. So many families in the big cities were jumped into 1 or 2 rooms like sardines. Others owned a villa for mistresses, another for their wife and children, and another for their children, and on and on. Sultani called his aides, Captain Samir Zayan and First Lieutenant Malika Daraji, and instructed them to come meet him immediately without providing any explanation. He searched for a coffee nearby and was extremely lucky to find one that had opened that very day to coincide with Independence Day. The owner was giving away free drinks, and the coffee was good. He looked at the glass and saw the name Lavazza on it.
You'll take a few questions?
Yes, please.
Do folks want to come up? Don't be shy.
Thank you. I'm curious, one of the things I've thought about over the last 2-3 years in particular with the ongoing situation in Gaza is, and Algeria is a very good setting for that,
Yeah.
is the idea of cultural healing after, because the Algerian Revolution was so brutal
Yeah.
that and I think about South Africa, I think about the Congo is still going through it,
Yeah. Sure.
and just when you were there with your wife, what was it you saw the level of cultural healing that has happened, that continues to happen?
Thank you. It's a great question. I think that it takes time. It's a long, long time and long process. It's like an individual trauma. Just think about people abused and raped, because colonialism basically is collective rape. And actually they raped women during colonization, of course. It takes time and courage, because you can face your memory, your past, if you have courage. If you are scared, it's hard. So it takes courage, and it's not easy. It's not easy to open the, to touch the wound. It's painful, but I mean, in Algeria, it has been now like 40 or 50 years, so more than 60 years. More than 60 years. So, Algerians did a lot about that, but we still have work to do, and unfortunately, there are other, horrible experiences going around. You mentioned Gaza. You mentioned Palestine, and they are very the Algerian experience is very similar to Palestinian experience because of the kind of the colonialism. So the colonialism is settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is the most brutal, and in the States, here in the States, so States was United States was built with the settler colonialism is just, you have, so the colonizer needed to kill, physically kill the colonized to take his or her place. So the settler colonialism here in the States, Australia, and we have South Africa. You mentioned South Africa, yeah, South Africa, and Israel. Yeah, and what's happening now in West Bank is obvious. It's obvious, that just pushing people out and destroying the agriculture. They're making the life of Palestinians impossible. And of course, we have genocide too. And this is very clear. This is very clear. I mean, because there are some people, they have some doubts about that, saying it's not genocide, but if not killing kids and children and women is not genocide, I don't know what that is it. Please.
Could you talk about the title and why the title, and also maybe explain a little more about the 4 characters?
Yeah.
And are they all linked by this crime that happens at the beginning of the book?
Yeah. The crime is about one. I don't want to spoil the story, but it's about one of the 4 fighters. Actually, your question is connected to what we were saying before. So one of the difficulties and the issues, the biggest issues when you deal with liberation from colonialism, there are some consequences. And this consequence is about violence. So because, there is a debate about that, violence, non-violence, but, in history, I mean, or in life in general, you know, in daily life, you know, having the right to defend yourself. So if you have to use the violence to defend yourself, you have to use the violence. And this is what happened for us Algerians and for Palestinians now. But the problem is this one. When you have this experience of violence, very often it's hard to control it. And what happened for us, Algeria, after liberation, the violence remained. This is why the title, The Fertility of Evil. So this is the violence is the evil in this novel. I mean, we had then, and there is no way then to stop this violence. And it's not just in the case of Algeria. In all post-colonial, you can say, post-colonial countries. You said Congo, yeah, in Africa, and still today. In Mali, just yesterday, 2 days ago. So yeah, it's in this way, violence is evil and is fertile. I mean, this is a continuity of violence.
I had 2 questions. First of all, thank you so much for coming to Seattle. It's
Thank you.
lucky to have you in, for the library to have you here. Thank you. The first was I taught in Morocco, and some of my colleagues there introduced me to Assia Jabbar,
Oh yeah.
L'amour,
Yeah.
la fantasia. And I was kind of interested in how you were thinking of your novel. It sounded like it was in relationship to that research you're talking about, but maybe into some of other literature that was engaging in kind of Algeria's history and the
Yeah.
different, I guess, the different colonial legacies, not just the French.
Right.
So kind of interested in that. I have one more question, but maybe if you could speak to that.
Yeah.
bit.
So you mentioned Assia Jabbar is one of the great Algerian writers, not just Algerian, I think. And I had a chance to meet her in Rome many years ago, and I spent a wonderful day with her. I think what I learned from her is that she was a historian, by the way, and she used history as a mirror to tell us a lot of stories, and the idea of history as a key in this novel is very powerful. It's very important. The idea is that past actually is part of the present. This is the main idea. So, and this is not just about Algeria. In a lot of countries, when you don't when you don't face your shadows and you don't look at your mirror as the past, you are living your past without knowing that you are living your present without knowing that you actually you are living in the past. This is déjà vu. You know, this is and it's incredible today. Incredible today. We are living. I think in trouble, and it's a déjà vu. I mean, we saw it in the first term. It's not the, and we are repeating the same. The same. You know, when you repeat a bad bad situation, of course, the second time is I mean, it's painful. It's horrible because we didn't learn anything. Yeah, the past for Assia Jabbar is important, and for the novel is important because the structure of my novel, there are 20 chapters, 10 chapters about the investigation of the crime, and it happens in one day, the Algerian day of Independence Day. It's the 5th of July in Algeria. The whole investigation is, and actually the question in the beginning of the novel is this: is because it's connected. Is it happened because the crime happens in the day, the Algerian Independence Day. So the question is coincidence or not? this is the whole. So 10 chapters about the investigation in Independence Day, and then 10 chapters about the historical chapters. So there is a part of investigation, first chapter, and then 58, and then a part of investigation and 62. You know, it's going back and forth. And the idea is that actually the past is part of the present. This is the idea of the structure. Please. Is it okay for a question?
Yeah, thank you. The second question is about Clash of Civilizations. And in the kind of translation thing you brought up, that novel is one where I always wish I could read it in Italian. I can read Italian a little bit, but my mind is jealous for the possibility to read it, because I guess I am trying to imagine the different dialects that you use with the different communities. And I'm just kind of interested in if you could speak to that, or how you wrote that into the novel, because it's just one of those things I don't know if I'll ever be able to have the chance to, you know, understand or appreciate through my own fluency. So
yeah, thank you. So thank you for reading Clash of Civilizations over in Leviathan in Piazza Vittorio. This book changed my life in a very positive way, because a dream came true. So when I published the book, I didn't know that the book will be published in translated into 10 languages, made a movie, and it's unbelievable how they. So you work for your dream, and your dream will work for you. This is my. I used to say this. So I worked hard for this book because I wrote the first version in Arabic. So, and the book was published 2003. And in 2004, I went back to Algeria after my exile. It's the end of my exile. I took with me the novel. Actually, the book was published in Algeria before my arrival. So I went to Algeria to present my book. It was a big revenge for my exile. So I went back with the book. Really big revenge. I mean, that means I didn't waste time. So I learned, I wrote something new. So after the end of my exile, I decided to write, because when I was writing the novel, it's about a neighborhood in Rome, people living in, Italians and immigrants living in the same building. This is the story. And there are issues about, and tensions about the elevator. This is why Clash of Civilization over elevator in Piazza Vittorio. Each character has his vision. So when I was writing this novel in Arabic, I could hear the voices of my characters speaking to me in Italian. So this is why I said it would be great if I can give them their voices, the original voice. And I started working on the Italian version. I worked on 30 drafts, because the first was just very basic. So sometimes I couldn't find the word. So I wrote, I kept the word in Arabic, and they went. And then after the first draft, I gave it to someone. All of our friends did it for free. So they gave me the observation, and the first draft was corrections, verbs. And you know, little for 2 years it was an obsession. But when you are, this is not insane obsession. This is a healthy obsession. So you are doing something very creative, and you have the intuition that maybe there is something interesting you are doing. And so the book was published in Italian, and then it's changed my life. Translated into English immediately, French, German, Japanese, Spanish, 2 translations, and the movie. It's so I worked on. So in Arabic version, I couldn't work on Neapolitan, because there's a Neapolitan concierge in the novel. I don't speak Neapolitan. What I did, I asked my Neapolitan friend, telling him, help me to with this character. I told him, imagine the character, the Neapolitan concierge is your grandma. And I selected passages in the novel, the sentences, because I found out that people speak their dialect when there are a lot of emotions, hungry, happy. So I selected those, and they said, how your grandma would say this. And I worked in this way. Was big, was a great experience. Great experience. Yes.
One more question. Your words are very descriptive and fragrant, and the title of the book is very captivating.
Thank you.
The Fertility of Evil.
The Fertility of Evil, yeah.
Can I ask how you put a nail to that title?
Yeah, it's it's by reading Algerian history, recent history, and I found that violence is, Fanon, Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon is an Algerian. He fought for Algerian independence, and he's buried in Algeria. He died in Washington D.C. because he had I think cancer. So he died in Washington D.C. in 1962, and he asked to be buried in Algeria. But Algeria at the time was under colonization, so the Algerian fighters, his brothers, took him. They crossed the borders, and he buried him in Algeria. So it was this Algerian land. So Fanon, in his vision, and he was a psychiatrist. So he found that violence is the only way for the colonized to heal themselves. And maybe he was right during the colonization. The problem that we had this extension of this violence after the independence, because during the colonization, French tortured Algerians. But unfortunately, even after Algerian independence, Algerians tortured Algerians. This is the extension of violence, and the Fertility of Evil is this way. In this, it's a reflection about this extension of violence. Instead of saying the war was over, the revolution was over, decolonization, we say is over. Now we have to do something new and not imitating the French colonizer. This is the title is in this sense.
We do have time for one more.
I was born in post-colonial India, and I understand what went wrong in India to make colonization possible. We were fragmented. It was easy for the British to come in and rule.
Yes, absolutely.
I think of a novel like Things Fall Apart.
Yes.
Chinua Achebe.
Yes.
Achebe,
Yeah.
where he talks about pre-colonial Nigeria becoming colonial Nigeria.
Yes.
What was it like in Algeria pre-colonially that made it possible for the French to come in and take over and rule? Were you also fragmented as a people? Was there a central governance structure? Was there what made it possible for the French to just walk in and say, this is ours?
Yeah. What happened? This is a good question. This is a good question. Actually, we have an Algerian thinker, intellectual. His name is Malik Ben Nabi. He died in 1973. And he tried to, he wrote in French, but he tried to read the history of Islam and found out what are the problems of Muslims today. And he created a concept called colonizability. And they mentioned it in Clash of Civilizations over an event in Piazza Vittorio. This is a mention of, I mentioned this. So colonizability is the concept is that the colonizer in the case the French or the British in India, they don't colonize the British. Didn't colonize British India because they were strong. They colonized India, or French colonized Algeria because Algerians and Indians were weak. This is the colonizability. It's the what you can say. It's the be able to be colonized. This is colonizability. So you are, you open your door and this is the, and you are right about all the tensions. Regarding Algeria, the French colonization, started in 1830. The problem was that the French, at least militarily, they were very stronger. So they had, weapons, and they did all they had technology. So the Algerian fought back immediately, and they didn't stop. But the balance of power was really, and the French, as I mentioned before, they committed massacres and genocides and it's incredible. It's in an incredible way. And Algerians are waiting the French to admit what they did in Algeria, but they refuse. So they refuse to at least to admit what they. And some of especially in France, the right wing, especially in the right wing, they still think that colonization was great. They brought civilization in Algeria, and this is not true. Absolutely not true. Because I can tell you, my mother was born during colonization, and she is illiterate. And my father learned to write and to read by himself. So where is this civilization? So this is not true. I mean, just propaganda. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.